dad's,
So in keeping with my dad's life and his legacy and what he wanted and how he wanted to be remembered, I really want to thank Lucia for putting that wonderful slideshow together. It's just it's so well made. We'll show it after the program as well. This program is very simple. The way that my father wanted. We didn't want to have a complicated program, a complicated approach to this whole thing. So we're going to sing one song to open us up. My son Dan Rainey Owen is going to open us up, but everybody please sing along. Probably best if we stand for the song, and then we're going to have a few people speak. We're going to start with Come Thou Fount.
Sing my heart to sing my praise. Sing of mercy, never ceasing. Offer songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mount I'm fixed upon it, mount of thy redeeming love. Here I raise my Ebenezer, here by thy great help I come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Jesus saw me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God. He to rescue me from danger, interpose his precious blood. Oh, that day when free from sin, I shall see thy lovely face. Oh, then blood washed linen, how I'll sing thy sovereign praise. Come, my Lord, no longer tarry, take my ransom soul away. Send thy angels now to carry me to realms of endless days.
we'll sing that last song again.
Send thy angels now to carry me to realms of endless days.
So as we prepared for this, we tried to come up with some people who had known my father at different points in his life. And when my parents married, and I'll go into this in a little while, they married in Roswell, New Mexico, and they had this group of friends that were a wonderful group of friends. And Terry and Alice Wilmot were among them. And Terry and Alice, would you like to come up and say a few words for us?
What? I'm a little bit older than I used to be. And I've got some notes that I brought. I'm going to try to make this work. Hope you'll hold with me. So I wanted to say hello, I'm Terry Wilmot, and I'm here today to visit with you about Aubrey. Share with you a little about my experience with him and who I knew him to be as a person. Like you, I'll always have memories of Aubrey as a special person with an outstanding and kind sense of humor, a reverence for life, and a desire to make the world a better place. middle of this, I may break down and start crying. Historically then comes a somewhat long time period before President Lyndon Johnson declared a war on poverty in the United States. Bonnie and Aubrey and Alice and I were all very young and naive when we heard the call to this war and enlisted as soldiers to be engaged in counties in southern New Mexico. Aubrey became head of the Home Education Livelihood Program, better known as HELP, and I set up the Community Action Program. Alice did the Job Corps recruitment, and Bonnie was the group's caregiver, taking care of two babies, Raina and Dan. More notes. Mine and Aubrey's approach to the war was very different. My approach was to plow ahead, knocking heads with the establishment. And I always had a lot of fun bringing down Mexicanos from the University of New Mexico that were hooked up with the program. And they'd come to Roswell and we'd do things and talk to people and have meetings and do all kinds of stuff. We invariably got into the newspaper and people were a little bit on edge about all of that. Anyway, Aubrey's approach was slow and steady. He was always the gentle man. He spoke softly and had no need to carry a big stick because he had a knack, real talent for getting people to stop and listen to each other and more often than not work together to accomplish a common goal. And that is a biggie, getting folks to work together to achieve a common goal. He didn't ever he never seemed to show frustration and anger. If something didn't work, he didn't ever think of giving up. What he would say is, we need to try another way. He always, I'll have it in hand here in just a minute. He always had a positive can-do attitude. And he always saw the glass is half full. Anyone that ever worked with Aubrey knew that he truly cared deeply about what he was doing. And they wanted to make a difference. Is he gonna make it? And to make a difference, he did in many ways. I think everyone thought of him during that time as their father. He inspired everyone more as a co-worker who was trying to help others get the job done. He believed if you could get people to work together, there was nothing they could not accomplish. We often laughed together over the years how we fought and lost the war on poverty. But Aubrey never gave up on his values quests, and that's what was amazing. He practiced what he preached and held on to what he believed. He kept working until he found a way that worked. We may not have won the war on poverty, but I know that Aubrey touched the lives of many, 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 many people. And to make their lives better during that time period. It was my pleasure and my blessing to have worked with Aubrey during those years. And to have remained friends for over 57 years. Aubrey and Bonnie went on to serve in the Peace Corps, and Alice and I went to graduate school, but we always stayed in touch, and our paths kept crossing. First in Colorado, and finally in a serendipitous way, we both ended up at a workshop at Ghost Ranch. Everybody knows Ghost Ranch. We were all in love with that enchanting place, and Aubrey said he'd like to live there and raise his family. Well, our friend who brought us to the seminar responded, speaking to Aubrey, saying, "So what in the world would you do here, Aubrey? Raise chickens?" Aubrey and Bonnie did move here and raised their family here, and yes, he did raise chickens. But as we all know, he did so much more as the community liaison director for Ghost Ranch, as he did all his life. Aubrey reached out, touching many lives and making them better, and that was what he did. Reached out, touched lives, and made them better. Reading from his earlier writings about the time when he contemplated his life ending, he said, "I expect the components of my physical, mental, and spiritual substance will be absorbed into the earth and the air and the sacred cosmos to be used and recycled. This shall I be remembered by the universe." This is how I should be remembered by the universe. Aubrey was a beautiful life led as a model for anyone who knew him. And that's about the size of what I have to say. It was a wonderful experience, 57 years. We weren't always in touch with each other physically, but we just respected him so much and admired what he believed in. Thank you very much.
We thank his greatest legacy was this wonderful family. Thank you.
So from taking that war on poverty, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, they felt the call to foreign service, and my parents moved down to Venezuela. There they met this young Puerto Riqueño Carman named Gunther Hasselbauer, who had his eye on this chica, Luna. And they met and married down in Venezuela. Gunther went to talk to her every single day until she agreed, and her father, more importantly, agreed. And then they were lifelong friends of my parents. And Gunther and Luna, would you like to come up and say a few words?
Good morning, everybody. Like Pablito said, as many of you may know, my husband Gunther and I met Aubrey and Bonnie the summer of 1967 in Maracaibo, Venezuela. Aubrey and Bonnie arrived in Maracaibo assigned by the Peace Corps to work in the administration. Gunther arrived in 1966 and he was here as a Peace Corps volunteer. It so happened that I had just graduated from 1967 from technical school and started to work at the First National Bank. One day, Aubrey and Bonnie visited the bank for some business and they noticed me. The same day, Gunther and other volunteers visited the bank too. The story goes later that Gunther mentioned to Aubrey and Bonnie, "Today, I met the girl I'm going to marry." 1 year later, we were married and Aubrey and Bonnie were our padrinos de boda. Our friendship grew for 53 years. Aubrey played a significant role in bringing us to New Mexico back in 1970. He contacted us after he returned from his 3 years in Venezuela with the Peace Corps. This was a life-changing event for us. Thank you, Aubrey and Bonnie. We fell in love with the state of New Mexico and we have lived here on and off since then. Our two daughters, Marisa and Lisa, were born in Albuquerque. Aubrey and Bonnie baptized our younger daughter, Lisa. Since then, we call them our padrinos compadres. We share many Easter Sundays and ran to the Chimayo with the children when they were younger, and other holidays at the beautiful Abiquiú home. On March 2016, spoken words, his gentle spirit, and sense of humor were many of his qualities. We will be forever grateful for his love and friendship. May he have rest and peace together with the Lord. Descanse en paz también, compadres.
And we have, sorry, along with my gray hair, my eyes are gone, so I can't even see where we are in the program. So, as all of you know, my parents had 3 kids, my older sister, Raina, my older brother, Dan, and me, and Giuseppe DiMartino is Raina's son, and Morgan Owen is Dan's son, and they'd like to say a few words. Giuseppe and Morgan?
Hello, everyone. I just first want to thank everybody for being here. Again, my name is Giuseppe, or Joey. You'll often hear people refer to me as. And Aubrey and Bonnie were Nani and Poppy to me and to all the grandkids. And I would just first want to just say how much of an honor it is to even be able to speak on his behalf today and remember him, because it's going to be difficult for me at times, but it won't take too long. So I recently, when we were going through pictures, my mom showed me a photo of me being a little baby, and she remembers that it was the first time I ever laughed, was Poppy sitting on the couch and me laying, and he had a hat with a funny brim, and he would lean the hat over and it would fall, and for whatever reason in my infant mind I thought it was the funniest thing, and gave a good belly laugh, and that just really touched me to think that he was the first person to make me laugh, because every picture we have of me as a young child and Poppy, I'm, absolutely overjoyed. So he really had a tremendous, played a tremendous role in my life at every stage, and what I would really first think of is all the things, all the small and large lessons he taught me, from hiking here, the expert in geology he would point out every single formation, composition of rocks, just amazing ability to kind of comprehend all of that. And then once this beautiful night sky, no sky or light pollution here, he would point out all the constellations, all the planets, and it just, at the time, I just had no ability to kind of realize how important that was. And now we think back, and it's just so touching to think he was able to do that for me. And then even smaller things, he taught me you always have to have chapstick in your pocket, especially while you travel. I remember one time he did forget, and it was not as fun of a drive to not have a little stick of chapstick. He taught me to always be very kind to animals, big and small insects. I still save every spider from every room I can, even though I know that doesn't make me the most popular person. But he would always love to just take care of all the animals, and that really transitioned to me in a very profound way. He taught me to finish with my left hand on the left side of the basketball goal. Up here in their house, they had a really, really awesome little metal goal with the net, and he would show me that you can't finish up with your right hand, and use the right hand to block the defender. So he was just amazing at big and small things that he taught all of us. And my sister always talks about what he really taught us is to be grateful for everything that we have. He was able to, get some type of joy and see some type of beauty and just fulfillment in life from things that, we take for granted every day. Whenever my sister would point out a sunset or a sunrise with him, he would always thank us and be grateful to us to share that with him. And
I think there's just no way for me to really be able to use words to explain how much that was important to us. So I would just like to say thank you all for being here and sharing this with us, because I know that it would mean everything to him, because it means everything to us. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Morgan Owen. I'm Dan Owen's son. Unlike most people, especially men, it's hard to feel, it's hard to cry. But something that I've learned about myself a long time ago was that I got all of Poppy's feelings for everything that this world has to offer. And so I don't hide it anymore. It's fine. I have the privilege and the honor to call Aubrey Owen, my grandfather, my Poppy. Poppy has shown me what it means to be a truly incredible person. His actions in this world have led to more positive change than any one man has the right to do. He's lived hundreds of years in the short time that we have him. Because in every single one of us, he still exists. And his son, Paul Owen, you can see Aubrey's understanding that faith has a role in our lives. We're put here for some reason. And there's lots of lessons to be learned that we can only learn through these experiences. And so no matter how much it hurts, I'm so happy to meet all of you. Again, I've met many of you when I was little and had no idea what an impact all of you and everything that Poppy was showing me was going to make on my life. And with the understanding that faith has a role, there's the understanding that we always need to learn. And no matter how much we learn, there's always going to be more to learn and more questions to answer. And his daughter, Raina Owen, you can see Aubrey's dedication to family and the strength that it takes to deal with the struggles that come with the day by day. We all live our own lives, and some of us turn into rain and go off to the other side of the mountains. But it takes a lot of strength to stay and to be there for the day by day, because it's hard in this world. And I'm also pretty sure that all of Poppy's political energy in trying to create bonds in this world and find the connections that really matter, I think that all went to Joey and Lucia, because I've got no interest in politics. They're very political kids. And in his son, my father, Dan Owen, you can see Aubrey's perseverance and ability to overcome every obstacle that being human has to offer. I took it for granted until this week that all the struggles that my dad has had to overcome, he's not been angry about it. He always took it with grace. And that's exactly how Poppy took every obstacle. I don't know how he does it. I truly don't. But every single time I'm struggling in a situation, I think that Poppy, he would just figure out how to do it. Say, shit happens. Fucking get it done. And in every person, the grandsons, the family members that have come into this, and everybody he met, whether that was who he worked with or the people that checked him out at a cash line, he was nice and made people's day. And those ripples, nobody can understand how far-reaching that goes. That man created magic in this world. Thank you, Father. Thank you for allowing him to be the man he needs to be. I'm sure he shared his struggles with you, but he never shared it with me. I was a kid. I had no right to understand all the pain that he went through. And he never showed it to me. And for that, I'm tremendously grateful. I love you, Poppy.
So you can see how much older Joey is than Morgan. I think he's about 24 hours older than Morgan. My dad, Poppy's, Aubrey's birthday was December 12th. Joey's was born on December 13th, and Morgan was born on December 14th. Not the same year. And another thing that I don't think you would notice unless I pointed it out is that these three grandsons that are here today are all wearing bolo ties. Those are all my dad's bolo ties. And they wear them very, very well. So, before we have a nice song, a little break, we have my brother Dan Owen, and I'm honored to hand the microphone to him.
I'm pretty loud, so I think y'all can hear me in the back. Sorry, just the way I am. Yes, good morning. My name is Dan Owen. I am blessed to be Aubrey Owen's middle child. My dad was one of the finest men I have ever known. I realize that you might think that might be a little partial. I am. He was. About 28 years ago, we celebrated his 60th birthday right here in this room. And we had many of you all here. Many of you all celebrated with him. A lot of the people that he celebrated with have since passed. And I see him today rejoining them and celebrating their reunification. I am so grateful that you all are here to celebrate his life. That's what I see we're doing today. Here we are at the end of my father's wonderful life, celebrating the life he lived. And, you know, people always say that he's standing here next to us or standing here with us. I definitely feel the Spirit here with us today. The Spirit sharing this time with us. My dad was a steadfast example of one who lived unwaveringly by his values and convictions. His gentle calm put people at ease. His genuine interest in what they had to say gave him the respect and admiration of those who had the pleasures of speaking with him, just as Terry said earlier. As a father, he was kind, loving, and a wonderful provider. We never had lots of money, but we had always had whatever we needed. He taught us to have a strong work ethic. One of his favorite sayings was, "Lo que vale cuesta." And translated roughly, those things that are of value will cost you. He knew that. He ingrained that in us. We knew what it took to make a difference. He would read us stories before bedtime and wake me up in the morning when I was in high school with a sing-song voice. "Hey, Dan, wake up, wake up, wake up." He cherished those years. At least I think so, he did. The day I left for the Navy, he was home. He was not happy with that I had made that decision. He said nothing until my ride arrived. He walked me outside and gave me the strongest hug I had ever felt. He then said, "Ciao, Dan. I love you." Then he walked in to the house and I left. Probably the biggest impact that he made upon me was the way he treated my mother. He taught me that a wonderful relationship with your spouse was what it was all about. He respected her. He loved her. He loved her unconditionally. He made her laugh. He treated her like the most beautiful woman on this earth.
She is.
And he told her so every single day. He would tell her how much he loved her. I wanted that kind of relationship. I knew that I would never settle for anything less. I've been blessed. I do have that kind of relationship that I so admire in my parents. He was the type of person that refused to say anything bad about anyone else. He did not always agree with everyone, but he he was always willing to listen. He understood people. He knew how to show respect and still have a difference in opinion. He could talk intelligently about almost any subject, yet he never came across as a know-it-all. He had a wonderful sense of humor and a quick wit that would keep you laughing in almost every situation. Those of you who knew my father knew one thing that was very consistent with him. That was his sense of time. He was always at least 15 minutes late. It was never a matter of disrespect. It was usually it was caused by being in the middle of a conversation with someone else and wanted to finish that before he left. I once asked him why he had such a bad sense of time. And he told me that it was something he learned in Venezuela. It gets better. He was in a meeting one day and started to look at his watch because he was very anxious about getting to the next meeting. And the gentleman that he was meeting with, he told him to relax. Stop living your life by the minute hand. Start living your life by the hour hand. And I think he took that to heart. He never wanted to disrespect anyone, didn't want to, nor did he want to leave a conversation half done. He was a wonderful communicator. I believe that this was part of his secret to successful communications. This is a lesson that I have yet to learn, but one that I still admire. He had many good friends he kept in touch with for decades, as you heard from earlier. His friends included people from every race, creed, color, nationality, you name it. He valued the diversity in the people he knew. And he treated them all like they were the most special person. He cared about justice and defended those who could not defend themselves. His entire life was dedicated to doing the right thing for others. He set up community programs. He helped people, many people. His work was a service to his fellow man, and he valued them greatly. He was serious about life, but didn't take life so seriously that he could not enjoy it. He loved to play card games, board games, especially walking with the grandkids and with the family. And he loved spending time with us. He loved music, from classical to jazz to country to not jazz. I think he owned every Beatles album ever made. Needless to say, I thought a lot of him. He was a great dad, great husband, great brother, and great grandfather. He was a true friend and a wonderful human being. This world has been enriched and beautified by his being here, and it has been saddened by his passing. We all have a choice at this point. We can say our goodbyes. And let his memory fade away. Or we can take those thoughts and ideals that he left with us and pay them forward. I choose the latter. I choose to embrace this world and leave it a better place. I want to end this as I ended every conversation with my father. Ciao, Mom. I love you.
And now, let's all sing Den Colores. Let's sing about the beautiful colors around us, about the beautiful world that God has created for us, that my Father loved so well. So thank you, everybody, for coming. Can you hear me in the back? Thank you, each one of you that are here are honoring my father, honoring my mother's husband. Thank you very much, Luna and Gunther Hasselbauer, Terry and Alice Wilmot, Joey and Morgan, my brother. Each one of you had different things to say about my dad, your grandfather, your friend. When you touched, you honored him you honored each one of us. Thank you, Lucia, for putting this slideshow together. It's wonderful for us to have these memories. We'll get to look at them afterwards as well. I want to thank my sister. She and her family, over the last years of my dad's life, were at their house every single day. Her act of service, her living her life of service, was a tribute to my dad. I want to thank my sister Rena. I stand up here today in my dad's boots. They're about a half size too big for me. And as I walk around in them, I have thick socks, but it's a reminder that I can't fill my dad's shoes. And I have the task now of honoring my father, of speaking about his life, of providing some hope for those that are left. And just like the boots are too big for me, the task is too big for me. So I hope you'll bear with me as I go through this. To conclude this service, this celebration of my dad's life, I'm going to do two things. First, I'm going to honor his life, try to give a brief summary of it in a way that puts it into context. And then I'm going to talk about it, what it means. The death of a loved one raises all the questions about what death means, what it means for the loved one that is passed, what it means for us that are left. So I'll offer a few words about my dad's death, hoping to help all of us understand what death is and how we should relate to that. My dad's life can be framed with this phrase that I've used again and again, that he lived a life of service informed by his faith. It was in his obituary. To give that a point of reference, I've continually recalled the passage from the Bible, from the prophet Micah. And Micah is prophesying to the nation of Israel, and he's saying, what do we need to do to be right with God? Do we come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old, with thousands of rams, 10,000 rivers of oil? What can bring us in right walking with God? And he says, no. He says, he has shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. In every way, my dad lived that life. He sought justice. He loved mercy. He walked humbly with his God. He was born December 12, 1933 in Abiquiú, Texas. His dad, my grandfather, was William Rainey Owen. He was a teacher, a carpenter, a leader in this community. My grandmother, his mother, was Aubrey Parsons Owen. She was a beautiful, loving mother that struggled with brain cancer and died a relatively young woman. I never got to meet her. My dad grew up in Abilene. He was the second of three boys. His older brother, Rainey Owen, lives with his beautiful wife, Rita, in Lexington, Texas. Rainey is 90 years old, and he was able to drive out to New Mexico and make it to my dad's bedside just hours before my dad passed. My dad waited for his older brother. His younger brother, Dan Kelly Owen, I have to be careful about Dan's because we have my dad's brother, Dan Kelly Owen, we have my brother, Dan Cornegay Owen, we have my son, Dan Rainey Owen, and I have a brother-in-law, Dan Owen O'Neill. So I have to be specific. We have to use the middle names to talk about them. So my dad's younger brother, Dan Kelly Owen, lives in Austin with his beautiful wife, Sandy. Neither Dan Kelly Owen or Rainey could be here today, but they'll watch the little video that we have of this. My dad went to high school in Abilene. He went to college at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth. He lettered in track and cross country. Those of you that live in Abiquiú, I'm sure, saw him running in his skimpy little shorts around Abiquiú and around those ramps over the years. He was student body president at TCU. He started work as a geologist for a company called Humble Oil Company, but he felt the call of service upon his life. Soon after marrying my mom, a subject I'm going to get back to, he decided to leave the corporate world and pursue this calling to service. First, he went to the University of Chicago Theological Seminary on a Rockefeller Scholarship, where he worked in the steel mills, and my sister was born, not in the steel mills. Then he went to Columbia University in New York City, where he got his master's degree in education. He started interviewing for teachers' jobs and actually had an offer from Santa Fe Public Schools, but he heard President Johnson's and President Kennedy's call to action on civil rights and social justice. You heard Terry talk about that. And through some discussions with my mother's Uncle Chuck Harris, he ended up working in the war on poverty in southern New Mexico. My brother was born in El Paso during this time, maybe the only good thing to ever come out of El Paso. Bringing our family to what they thought was the final number of 2 kids. How perfect it was, right? My parents then heard the call to foreign service and moved to Venezuela, where my dad was on staff with the Peace Corps and my mom took care of my brother and sister. Surprise, surprise! I showed up in Maracaibo, ending my brother and sister's happy little family. My parents came back to the States, and my dad continued his work on the war on poverty in southern New Mexico, then Nebraska, then Colorado. In the early 70s, they felt a call back to New Mexico and back to a rural environment. After some discussions with the people at Ghost Ranch, he ended up as community programs director there, working to do what he could to seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with his God in northern New Mexico for the rest of his career. Throughout his life, he continually did what he could to seek justice, to act justly. In his words, justice, these are his words, sharing all of what we have with all of humankind and all of creation, walking gently on the earth, using only what we need, waging peace which comes from within and which comes from justice and sharing, to bear good fruit, to do what I've been put here to do. And then he quoted JFK, with faith in God, but knowing that here on earth, his work must surely be our own. Some of the ways that he lived those values of seeking justice, loving mercy, and walking humbly with his God. First, seeking justice. He did what he could to create economic and social opportunities for people who had none. He worked with the Community Loan Fund to advance the ability of people in underserved communities to have access to capital. He helped to found the New Mexico Solar Energy Association, created sustainable energy solutions for people throughout New Mexico, throughout the world. He waged a decades-long battle with the Corps of Engineers to get the Abiquiú Dam, that he called a dam, to work with local ranchers and farmers to stop a lake expansion and regulate water storage and releases in a way that considered local ranching interests upstream and farming, ranching, and acequia interests downstream. He loved mercy. He did what he could to build bridges between people. He brokered a resolution to a very long-standing dispute across northern New Mexico, getting over 124 families to swap land with the National Forest Service and Ghost Ranch. Giving the National Forest Service and Ghost Ranch gave some land to them, to the families they gave some land to them, giving these families clear title to their land for the first time in generations. He worked with different economic cooperatives through Ghost Ranch and throughout northern New Mexico. Worked very closely for a very long time with Griselda Dominguez for decades on these projects. He served as a founding member of the Rio Chama Acequias Association and served as board vice president. He played over here in the gym for many years with the Abiquiú Viejos basketball team into his 60s. He loved animals. No person I've ever known, except maybe my sister Raina, has ever had a softer heart towards animals. He would take, as Joey said, he would take spiders out gently out of a newspaper, but not black widows. If he had a black widow bite him on the neck, that was the end of that. He loved his dogs, his chickens, his horses, his cats, even his turkeys. We raised turkeys for food, and the turkeys thought that he was their mother. He would climb on the roof to fix the roof, and the turkeys would all stand below, calling to him. We raised rabbits and chickens and ducks and turkeys for food, but he never took pleasure in slaughtering those animals. He killed them for food and to teach us about life, but a little piece of him died with each animal that we killed for food. He walked humbly with his God. He grew up in a conservative Christian home and in a faith tradition. And he went through searching phases in his quest to know God and to be known by him. When we moved to Abiquiú, he converted to Catholicism. He served as a lay presider. He led communion services throughout the parish. He served twice as mayordomos of Santa Rosa. He actually brokered a donation of the land around Santa Rosa. It was owned by a guy that you longtime Abiquiú people will know, Alva Simpson. That land was owned by Alva Simpson, and my dad brokered a donation of that land back to the diocese so that it could be owned by the people of Abiquiú. And as Charlie Carrillo told me this morning, is one of the reasons that Charlie's even here today, because of his attraction to the mission of Santa Rosa and working with my dad and Benito and Juanita Cordova. When he retired, he loved his animals, he worked on his house, he worked on the garden, he worked on the acequia, and he loved to travel to see his grandkids. You've heard from each one of their families here today, and you see the evidence in the slideshow. Any summary of his life has to include the love story that was his relationship with my mother. He met my mother on a warm summer evening, This is the hardest part, so just bear with me as I get through this. So they met on a warm summer evening in 1958 when she was 19 and he was 26. There's no way I would let my 19-year-old daughter go out with a 26-year-old guy. Especially on a blind date. This was a blind date. But they did, and I'm glad they did. He told me later that he knew that night, that he had met the woman he was going to marry. They were married for 60 years. This last August 19th was their 61st anniversary. Each decade, each year, each day were more loving than the ones that came before. They had an adventure of a life, moving from New Mexico to Chicago to New York, back to New Mexico, to Venezuela, back to New Mexico, to Nebraska, to Colorado, back to New Mexico, to Abiquiú, and finally to Albuquerque, where they lived about a half mile from my sister, and they loved each other through the last chapter of their love affair. Through those moves, they moved through seasons of their life together. In and out of friendships, in and out of communities. They had a wonderful early marriage, a Camelot phase, when they were young, idealistic married people, and they had wonderful friends with the Joneses, the Bergstallers, the Wilmots, the Shannons, and Roswell, playing games and loving life, changing the world. Then they had those intense service years in New Mexico, Venezuela, Nebraska, Colorado, and then New Mexico again, forming intense relationships with so many people. The Hasselbauers in Venezuela, Jim Yee, Gerald and Rosemary Martinez, Ramon and Gisela Dominguez, Guzman and Francis Martinez, Robert Harrison, Charles Wetter, Jim Hall, Peter Van Dresser, Charlie and Debbie Carrillo, Tomas Atencio, Agustin and Merlinda Garcia, Sophie Garcia, Fred Vigil, Jim and Barbara Richardson, and so many others. They raised their children. They saw us move off to different places. They buried pets. They buried their parents. And they loved each other. When we're young, we look at the one that we're in love with, and we profess that we're going to love them until we die. We say, I want to grow old with you. In our vows, we pledge to love them in sickness and in health, in good times and in bad, for richer or for poor, until death parts us. But let me tell you, when we're young, we have no idea what that means. No idea what that means. They're well-meaning but empty promises. Well, my parents showed what that means. I wish all of you could have seen what my sister and her family saw every day. What my brother and I saw on visits. What many of you saw from time to time on visits. As my parents aged, as my dad began to fail, their love only grew deeper. They care so much about each other. They were always kind. My mother was always so patient. My mother said every day, we're just so blessed that we have each other. Many times in old age, approaching dementia or Alzheimer's, my dad died with Alzheimer's, people grow bitter, mean, coarse, both the patient and the caregiver. None of those things happened with my parents. They grew sweeter and sweeter towards each other, holding hands all the time, telling each other that they loved each other. Let me give you two pictures of that. First, about 2 or 3 years ago, my parents came to Texas to visit my dad's brothers. My wife Shirley's here, and I drove them on that trip. My dad loved music. You heard different people talking about that, and he loved musicals. So I would often play them on the stereo on trips. On this trip, I played Fiddler on the Roof, and there's a song called Do You Love Me? It was the old man, Tevye, asked his wife Golda if she loves him. They've been married for a long time, and it was an arranged marriage. There was little, if any, talk of love in the marriage. Obviously, there was a lot of talk of love in my parents' marriage. As this song was playing, my dad had lost much of his ability to communicate with us. He knew who we were and could interact with us and speak with us, but the conversations were very limited. He sat in the front seat and listened to that song, and music brought him alive. In the song, Tevye asks, but my mother and my father said we'd learn to love each other. I'm not going to sing it. So now I'm asking Golda, do you love me? And Golda says, I'm your wife. And Tevye says, I know, but do you love me? And Golda says, do I love him? For 25 years, I've lived with him, fought with him, starved with him. For 25 years, my bed is his. If that's not love, what is? And Tevye says, did you love me? And Golda says, I suppose I do. And Tevye says, and I suppose I love you too. And together they says, it doesn't change a thing, but even so, after 25 years, it's nice to know. It's a sweet little story, but that's not the point. I looked at my dad, I was driving. I looked at my dad as the song was playing. He had reached his hand behind him to my mom in the back seat and was holding her hand. A tear went down his cheek as Golda told Tevye that she loved him. The second picture I want to give you. Last month on July 8th, we knew the end was coming. After many dear friends came and went through the day, after my Uncle Rainey and Aunt Rita came and went to their hotel, my dad finally decided it was time to stop fighting. My mother leaned over him and repeated throughout the day, I love you, darling. We are together forever. Finally, as my brother, my mother, and I held his hands as she caressed his forehead, with her proclaiming her love, and as we prayed, his soul left his body. That, my family, my friends, is a love story, beginning to end. He loved her, and she loved him. So what do we do with that information? What do we do when a great man dies? What do we do at the end of a love story like this? What does death mean? Where are we supposed to go from here? What about death? We don't need to make it up. We don't have to say what we think or make up fairy tales. God's word tells us. In his first letter to the church in Thessalonica, the Apostle Paul, St. Paul, San Pablo, tells the church what happens. They were concerned